title of this video suggests, these are my top 10 anime fights, and I am well aware that there are some better fights than some of the ones that find themselves on this list, but this is my list, and these are my favorites. The ones that do the most for me on a personal level. With that said, I'd also like to state some of the rules I made while compiling this list. One, unlike a lot of lists like these, I'm willing to allow up to 2 fights for franchises. I think it's wrong to exclude one amazing fight over another one just because the other one is only slightly better. And I also rank these fights based on personal attachment, pure enjoyment value, appreciation for certain aspect of the fights, and how freaking hype they can be. And with that out of the way, let's get to the list. Number 10. Piccolo vs. Android 17 from Dragon Ball Z. Now, upon rewatching this fight, I actually found myself enjoying it for even different reasons than when I had previously viewed it. In my original encounters with this episode, I loved the back and forth nature of Piccolo and 17's brawl, as they were an even match until Piccolo started to get worn out. I liked the various moves the two used on each other, and how Android 17's machine elements were actually incorporated into the fight. On this viewing, I heavily enjoyed the banter between the two, as they were both cockily assuring themselves of their own victory, only to realize just how strong their opponents actually were. Piccolo's fusion with Kami had given him a bit of an ego boost, and he had assumed it would be all he needed to finally put the androids in their place. 17 underestimated Piccolo, assuming he would be just as weak as he had always been, and believing himself to be the peak. The two soon just learn how incorrect they are, as they have this intense brawl. 17 has to survive Piccolo's surprisingly effective offensive, and learn to deal with his head games. Piccolo has to put out all the stops to even have a remote chance of beating 17, because the longer this fight goes on, the closer Piccolo comes to losing. We also get to see the two sides of 17. The calculating machine side of him from the android part that comes up with the necessary offensive and defensive to deal with Piccolo's physical and psychological attacks, and then the hot-headed and playful human side of him that enjoys his fight with Piccolo, becomes angry and shocked at Piccolo's onslaught, and appreciates the learning experience the fight is bringing him. It also shows us that he isn't a complete villain, as he offers Piccolo a chance to leave and honestly fights him because it's the more fun option, not necessarily because it's the evil one, though with the android, that line is pretty blurred. The fight doesn't overstay its welcome and honestly ends at the best time. We know who's going to end up winning the fight, and Cell's interruption allows the fight to end before it could get dragged out. Like a lot of Dragon Ball Z fights, 17's machine qualities allowed him to never run out of energy, while Piccolo's organic body just could not hold out forever, and he and 17 were just too evenly matched. If you wanted to beat an android, you had to be far above them in power. There was no other option. Number 9. So, once again, this is my own personal list, and I know some might argue whether this should even count as a fight at all, or if it should even count as multiple ones between all the different Pokemon. But I'm going to say it's a one-on-one anime fight between two Pokemon trainers. I also know this fight doesn't necessarily have the best animation at times, and has a little bit of a clunky beginning. Ash is really intuitive in this battle, and the fact that he forgets fighting moves don't work on ghost types is a bit silly, and just kind of unnecessary. This causes Charizard to go out like a bitch. I know it's meant for shock factor, but Charizard deserves better than that. But aside from that, I feel this is the best Pokemon battle of the entire series, and where Ash's journey should have ended. I quit watching after a bit of the Sinnoh region, as I felt I could fall back on this as the closure I needed for the series. There may be better battles in later seasons, but I haven't seen them. For me, this is the culmination of Ash's journey. After going through so many trials and tribulations, he finally reaches what should have been the end. The last obstacle that would have kept him from becoming the master of his own battle facility and a top Pokemon trainer. Ash faces the man who has defeated him not once, but twice. He hasn't even counting the time he was possessed. And this is his last shot at beating him. He assembles all of his original Pokemon that Show staff bother to bring back, and bonds with them one last time before engaging in a riveting 4-on-4 battle that shows him using good tactics, seismic toss aside, and plays on his emotional connection with all his original Pokemon. The final battle between Regice and Pikachu is an awesome affair, as Ash lays everything out on the line for one final attack. This fight might arguably be considered only decent by some, but I find it to be a satisfying conclusion to the Battle Frontier arc, and honestly where the show should have ended, as I really stopped caring afterwards. You don't set up something like this and just continue because of reasons, but that aside, this is the best Pokemon battle in the entire series for me, and one of my favorite anime fights of all time. Number 8. As you may know, Ippo is chock full of great boxing matches, but I don't feel like any of them are as complete a package as Ippo and Sendo's second fight. Hawk vs. Takamura had a better build-up, but the fight wasn't quite as good and the ending chose the double dip, not ending where it should have and making the fight overall feel a tad drawn out. Miyata vs. Mashiba was a stellar fight with great build-up and a great ending, but I feel the Ippo and Sendo fight just edged it out in both categories and beats it in the actual fight itself. Ippo and Sendo's rivalry is part of what gives this fight its extra boost. They're so even in their skill set and yet so different personality that makes a riveting conflict of personalities. Sendo is more of a thug whose tactic is to instill fear into his opponent and make them break. Ippo just wants to fight his opponent, doesn't look to end their boxing career. Sendo used to go looking for fights all the time. Ippo isn't much of a fighter outside the ring, and doesn't go looking for fights. However, that doesn't change the respect they have for each other. They just pound each other in the face and respect the hell of each other while doing so. They want to beat the other man and prove that they are the champion. Sendo so he can prove he's the strongest, Ippo so he can know what strength really is. And they also have similar motivations feeling this fight as well. Sendo wants to avenge his prior loss to Ippo and to truly begin to feel like champion. Ippo wants to get the monkey off his back from the prior loss, not to Sendo but to the prior champion. And he wants to prove he can beat a powerful champion, unlike his last loss, and show that he's made some growth. The fight itself has a good back and forth nature to it, with Sendo almost always having the edge, but Ippo getting enough shots to make it a fairly even fight. Ippo's final combination to Sendo is so freaking satisfying, and though Sendo gets back up, it's only to look into the eyes of the man who beat him and get some of his dignity back, calling him back to his prior loss where he couldn't even see Ippo because he was already knocked unconscious. These two fighters complement each other so well and create my favorite fight from the Hajime no Ippo series. Number 7. Eren vs. Reiner is the newest fight on this list, and probably the shortest. And maybe the impression it left on me is giving me some bias towards it, and it may not age as well as some of the other fights on this list. It is over relatively quickly when you compare it to the other fights on this list, but I don't really care. Every time I see this fight, I get excited, not just because it's the best fight in Attack on Titan, hands down. Even over the excellent exchanges between Annie and Eren, it's not just because the lead up to this fight is hype as shit, though it most certainly is. I could go on forever about how much I love the scene that leads into this fight, but I'll just restrain myself and say it gets you into the perfect mood for this literal clash of titans. The real reason I love this fight is because it showcases Eren actually using strategy and working with his teammates, rather than screaming at the top of his lungs and lunging into battle. It contains some excellent use of what appears to be MMA tactics that show Eren can actually use his head when he isn't hitting Mikasa with it. And it also makes a nice callback to the training corps days and contains some nice irony as Reiner's comrades' moves are used against him. Reiner is way too much for Eren to handle on his own, but he is able to play it smart and come out ahead anyway. It's just so freaking satisfying to actually see that for once. The scale of the fight is also big, as we get to see how big they are compared to the landscape around them, such as when Reiner's arm falls next to Mikasa, or when we see the destruction caused by them to the surrounding landscape. The fight also had an excellent beginning as they are literally starting to fight in midair, only for us to pan back to see Eren getting his ass handed to him. We expected a more even fight, but boy does Eren get an ass whooping. And he only starts outsmarting Reiner to get an edge. But Reiner isn't an idiot either, and we see how aware he is of his position all the time. Mikasa's assist to Eren also looks glorious. The fight has an epic conclusion just as Eren seems to be finally getting a well-earned victory for once, mostly on his own. He has a giant-ass titan dropped on him, and he is kidnapped once again. Oh well, at least it did give us this epic fight before he once again reverted to his old ways. Hey, and this one wasn't his fault for once. Number 6. Yusuke vs. Toguro, the peak of Yu Yu Hakusho, with Yusuke reaching what we thought to be his full potential against the best villain the series ever had. With the best tournament arc in anime, we got the one-on-one final confrontation that did not disappoint. Even with both of the competitors dicking around for a little bit at the beginning, we got a battle chock full of emotion and grit. We got the powerful demon Toguro showing his human side, while also showing just how far he at least wanted to make it seem he would go, in order to push Yusuke to his absolute limit. We got to see Yusuke deliver some amazing spirit guns that showcase just how powerful he had become. I had forgotten how powerful some of these blasts were. And to think the only attack to actually damage Toguro was the one where Yusuke used everything he had. Toguro is always in full control in this fight until the very end, and even then Yusuke was only able to be just a bit more powerful than him. There were some nice sequences sprinkled throughout the fight, and we got to see just how much Yusuke really cared about his friends. We got to see various forms of Toguro as he waited for Yusuke to finally show his true power. Yusuke is really lucky his opponent was someone who had waited 50 years for someone who could make him go all the way. The music throughout the fight is used effectively, and the expressions on Toguro's and Yusuke's face at times summed up their characters very well. The final sequence of the fight is short and sweet. It's not a 2-episode long wave battle, but a struggle that lasts only a couple minutes and ends on a satisfying note as Toguro got what he always wanted and Yusuke gets to live. Everybody wins. This was the pinnacle of Yu Yu Hakusho for me. The Chapter Black arc was so-so for me, and I thought the whole Demon World stuff was incredibly rushed. The show was never as good as it was in this fight, and for that, it more than earns its spot. Number 5. Naruto vs. Neji might not get onto a lot of people's top 20 Naruto brawls, but personally, I just love this fight too much to remove it from the list. I'm not really quite sure what it is about this fight, but it's always been something that has made me gravitate back towards it whenever I think of Naruto. It might be the interesting dynamic of the genius versus the failure that draws me to it, as who doesn't want to see someone who works so hard beat someone with all of the natural talent in the world, even if that failure learns to start using hacks mode in this fight, but that's really besides the point. Naruto is never really in control of this fight, and even when he's using the Nine-Tailed Fox's chakra, he can only really go toe-to-toe with Neji. Neji is the genius who has an answer to Naruto's every move and outclasses him in almost every way. And yet Naruto finally outsmarts him in the end anyway, and Neji finds Naruto doing what Neji had been doing to him the entire fight, looking down on him. All because Neji accepts Naruto's defeat as the only logical conclusion, and while Naruto spits in the face of that logic as he does everything he can to overcome his own destiny. Speaking of destiny, that brings up another good asset of this fight, Naruto and Neji's conflicting ideologies. Both of them were cursed at their own birth or their parents' birth with a burden that was placed on them by fate. Neji has kind of accepted this fate, even if he's going to be as spiteful about it as possible. Naruto refused to accept this fate, and even uses the curse he was born with as a strength. Their speeches throughout the fight weren't really annoying to me, as they were fighting philosophically as much as they were physically, and I felt it added greatly to Neji's character while showing the better side of Naruto's. This fight is probably the most likable I have ever found Naruto, as he's trying to avenge a friend, while also having to put up with a lot of shit from a guy who has really needed a good punch to the chin for a while to give him a wake-up call, which he got during this fight. And finally, I also just like the fight itself, as it really shows how impressive Naruto is, while just how much more powerful Neji is until Naruto unleashes the Nine-Tails. I like the introduction of the rotation. I really like the more mundane details of this fight, like how intimidating Neji looks as he slowly walks and destroys Naruto's clothes right in front of him, bringing forth feelings of hopelessness and intimidation. Oh no, this fight checks a lot of boxes off in what I like in a fight, and stands as my favorite fight in a series full of great ones. Number 4. So some quick context that you probably don't care about, but I feel really shows how great this fight is. I think Trigun is overrated, and I don't really like Vash as a character. I won't really go into much detail why, as this video is about fights, but I will just say I think this series is alright, but not a classic like most seem to say. With that said, even I can't deny how freaking awesome this fight is. In fact, I think I might even like it more than a lot of fans, as I feel it isn't brought up nearly enough, as I just could go on and on about how good it is. The last 5 episodes of Trigun had gotten me more into the series, and this fight was the icing on the cake. After the mixed feelings I had towards the series, I was certainly not expecting one of my favorite fights of all time to take place between a main character I didn't really care for, and a villain I felt needed far more screen time, as he barely gets any other than flashbacks before this. I in general love the episode this fight is in, and as I feel it does a good job of showing how both the brothers came to this point, and how Knives might be a sadistic son of a bitch, but he truly believes he is doing what is right for his people. It also shows that he indeed places some personal attachment and trust in Vash, as he is just outright shocked when he shoots him, and is even hoping he can still convince him of the error of his ways while they are fighting. And all this leads into superb gunfight that has some brilliant use of tactics that just shows how intelligent both of these men really are. From Knives use the tree branches to wound Vash to Vash's outmaneuvering his brother. The early parts of this battle are ripe for strategy. And then we get an intense game of Russian roulette that plays into the fight's conclusions. And then we get the beam struggle between Vash and Knives, which is a good display of their yin-yang dynamic. The intelligent way in which Knives immobilizes his brother is awesome, and then the divine intervention finally makes use of the gun Vash had brought with him, and Vash finally gets to use the bullet from the Russian roulette sequence to give his brother a taste of his own medicine. I also like the conclusion, as Vash is finally able to subdue his brother. Oh no, this fight was a glorious capper to an anime I had started to pick up in its last 3 episodes and gave me one of my favorite fights of all time. Number 3. When I first saw Gon vs. Hisoka, it gave me the type of goosebumps I hadn't experienced while watching a fight in a long time. It's really weird on that aspect, as the fight is really one-sided when you look at it, as Gon never has a chance. And yet it still gets me pumped up in spite of that. Hisoka is essentially just getting a preview of the potential fight he might have with Gon down the road, but he's still getting so turned on at the thought that it's disturbing on multiple levels, and yet he's so much in line with his character and that train of thought. He is a great villain, but I wouldn't want him near me. This fight is essentially a learning experience for Gon, as it takes him a while to even land a punch on an immobile Hisoka, and even then he has to reach into his bag of tricks to do so. Gon makes a significant step in his development here, but we are shown just how big the gap between the two of them really is. Hisoka just toys with Gon throughout the fight and uses him as his own plaything, and while also imparting wisdom onto him, trying to help him reach the potential he sees in him, though only so he can kill him once he gets to be more powerful. This is a good demonstration of how far Gon has come, and yet how far he still has to go. The dynamic of the ref is also interesting, as he sees the power gap between the two, and he's just trying to keep Gon from dying, as Hisoka might just kill him if the match goes on for too long. The animation for the fight itself is also superb, and each sequence is delightfully entertaining. From Gon's opening of bras to Hisoka's just complete domination of him in the latter portion of the fight. Hisoka doesn't even have to use his bungee gun much. The ending also shows the stark contrast between Hisoka and Gon's characters. Hisoka rather unnecessarily lies just to show how much he likes to be deceptive, and Gon, looking the direction Hisoka pointed, showing how gullible he is, even though he's fighting his complete opposite, and a pedophilic clown to boot. Gon has to accept the gap between them, but also notices that it isn't as insurmountable as others might think. It just takes the longest time to get there, especially at the rate the manga's going. Anyway, this fight is awesome, and it got me to love Hunter x Hunter that much more. Number 2. I have to say something real fast. If I wasn't sticking to the 2 fight per anime rule I made for this list, Gohan vs. Cell would have gotten on here somewhere. I actually like it better than Piccolo vs. 17, but I felt that fight needed to be put on this list, even if it is only at number 10. Gohan vs. Cell would have gone on somewhere up on here on this list, but this fight is much better in my opinion, and I say that as someone whose favorite character is Gohan. This fight doesn't drag itself out like many of DBZ's fights, and I'm also talking about the movie here. I haven't seen Super yet, and I don't know how long that one goes, and has a wide variety of settings that keep the fight fresh at every turn, whether it be an aerial duel through a forest in a city, a brawl in a wasteland, a blast battle in Underground Link, or a final struggle above the earth. This fight doesn't stick around in one location and gives viewers an exhilarating ride. I also love the dual dynamic of this fight. On one hand, we have Beerus genuinely teaching Goku throughout this fight and conversing with him about his Saiyan pride. It is a genuine learning experience for Goku and some nice character development for him. On the other hand, this is still a fight for the survival of the Earth, and Beerus is still planning on destroying it if Goku can't stop him, or at least meet some of his expectations. The stakes are high for this fight, and it helps invest the viewers more than just a simple sparring session would. Throughout the fight, you can see just that this is a true battle of the gods, as Goku and Beerus change the landscape of the Earth with their struggle, and Beerus' final blast is an imposing threat looming over the entire Earth. The fight is also filled with several awesome movements, whether it be the opening punch of the fight, Goku's rejuvenation at the end of the fight, or my favorite moment, this.
I will not let you destroy my world!
As a DBZ fan, it was so satisfying to finally get a movie that had a great villain and a fight that were both canon and expanded the universe of the show to an extent that I haven't even begun to properly appreciate it. I also love that Goku lost, as you don't really see that often in the show, and this is the first time since Cell that he actually gave up. Even then he had Gohan as a backup and was pretty sure he wouldn't be able to defeat Cell on his own. Here, there is no backup, and he is humanity's only hope, and he lost. He's just lucky that Beerus can be rather loose with the definition of destruction. Number 1. Miriam is the result of millions of years of effort by his species to produce the pinnacle of evolution. Netero's 100 type attack is a result of repeating the same brief routine of punch, pray, and punch in the mountains for over a decade. This fight is the result of Yoshihiro Tagashi spending dozens of chapters writing the greatest arc in anime history, even though it honestly kinda sidetracked the main story for a while. The fight is just fucking awesome. Every story element works in this fight, whether it be the Keen's quick adaptation and analysis of Netero's ability that showcases high intelligence, and the fact that the only way Netero has a chance of even fighting the Keen and matching his speed is because of one body motion that he spent years in the mountains to perfect. The King can't be hurt by Netero's attacks, but he also can't get through them or outmaneuver them, and something has to give. And it turns out that it's Netero's body that ultimately does, as Miriam is just too much for even him to handle. Netero lands thousands of blows on the King over the span of only a few minutes, but is only able to cause him to feel a dull sense of pain. The King, meanwhile, is using his own body as a guinea pig to try and find an opening he needs to immobilize, not kill, Netero. It is an awesome fight dynamic, and it leads to an excellent story throughout its duration. The motivations are strong, as Netero is originally fighting for the survival of his species, and by the end he is fighting for his species' right to decide its own fate. Meanwhile, the King only fights Netero because he knows his name, and Miriam's human side desires that the most. Neither person in this fight is really the bad guy, as Miriam is looking out for his own species, and has kind of become a decent person at this point. Human enslavement be damned. Netero is looking out for his own species as well. In better circumstances, they may have been able to actually talk this out. I also love the visuals for this fight, as the imagery with the millions of needles that Miriam has to navigate is a perfect symbolism for this fight, and the sight of Netero stopping his leg from bleeding was badass. The final moments of the fight were also superb. Netero's final attack is a glorious spectacle, and the King's arrogance and benevolence at the end were a good summation of his Ant-King side. But my favorite part of the entire fight is the ending, as Netero just laughs at the King and shows him how irrelevant all those years his species spent on genetic perfection were in comparison to humanity's capacity for evil. I love the fact that the hero side of a fight anime actually used a fucking dirty bomb to solve the problem. In spite of all his skill, the only thing Netero could do was use an assembly-made product. This fight was definitely the pinnacle of the Chimera Ant arc, as the rest of the arc kind of slowed down. In reality, it sped up after this. Don't get me wrong, the arc is still near perfect. It's just not as perfect as this fight, and I don't care if that statement doesn't make as much sense. This fight is good, and everybody should watch it. And those are my top 10 favorite anime fights. Sorry if your favorite wasn't on here, but again, this is my list. But if you want to tell me your favorite fights in the comments, be my guest. It might even spur me to watch them to see what you're fussing about. With that said, thanks for watching this video. I hope it helps some of you appreciate or enjoy these fights even more than you did before, because I just feel they deserve more attention, even if some of them already get a ton of that already. And I have nothing else to say, but later.